Hey herd watchers. Okay, let's bang out a quick video as I'm driving home on Syria. So Syria is interesting from a couple of perspectives, politically and personally. So let's talk about, I don't know, sort of the political and strategic implications. So here's the deal. For the last 8 years or so, one thing that has been clear on the world stage is that Barack Obama has had no real capacity for taking decisive action. He, yes, sent in a couple of missions here and there, mostly when he was finally browbeaten down by the military, or when he was assured that he had sort of all the signs were so far in his favor that the chances of failure were incredibly small, and he had other people to blame. He had a fall guy. So what that meant is, strategically, the U.S. was very weak and very toothless. We not only didn't intervene, but we're really not in a position to intervene. We were just trashing the military budget as we went. Weapon systems were not being maintained. In a lot of cases, troops didn't even have what they needed to train properly. Future weapon systems were being shut down, and the military itself was being demoralized and turned into a social experiment rather than a combat-ready force. And so, as a whole, the Obama years mark a low point in America's ability to project power, and you saw that in how the world evolved during that time. So now, in comes President Trump, and for a long time, the U.S. has maintained that we would respond to the use of nuclear or chemical or biological weapons in the Middle East with force. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows we're not thrilled about the level of violence that's happening in the Middle East as it is, but that we are not going to tolerate these extremist states beginning to dabble in weapons of mass destruction. We've done it before to stop them, and we reserve the right to do it again. And everyone was on notice of that. But what they also knew was that Barack Obama didn't have the stones to really take action. So now that President Trump is in power, and here's Russia and the Syrian government sort of working hand in hand, and it looks very strongly like the Syrian government decided to use chemical weapons against rebels. Now, there's some obfuscating information there, and it may, I guess, ultimately, there's a small possibility turn out that it was some sort of weird false flag operation by the rebels themselves, though there's no reason to believe that that's true. Weirder things have happened in history. So once that line was crossed, now the U.S. government is in the age-old position. Do we respond, or do we not respond? And we have one of three ways we can respond. We can respond by doing nothing and send off an email and, sort of whine and cry through diplomatic channels. We can respond unilaterally with military force, or we can attempt to go hat in hand to the UN and build some sort of weird coalition, ineffective coalition, and attempt to get an international response. And in this particular case, our president, Donald Trump, alpha male that he is and that we elected him to be, decided to go ahead and take unilateral military action. And he did it in a way that I think marks a new era in U.S. power projection and is exactly the way we should be projecting power. And in a very real way, it's the way Israel has perfected to project power. He let the people involved know that retaliation was coming. He let them know in a way that allowed them to minimize civilian casualties. He planned the strike in a way that minimized collateral damage, but he did not give them so much notice that they could defang the strategic and tactical aims of the strike. And then where he struck, the carefully chosen location, was hit with overwhelming force. Now, a lot of the armchair folks who are now looking at the photos on Facebook, who have no idea what kind of weapon systems we're talking about, are like, oh my God, there's not enough, devastation for 50 Tomahawk missiles, and they're attempting to put those of us who support the military and support the strike in a bind and say, well, either the missiles suck or the missiles were not armed, or whatever, because for the amount of money you paid, you didn't do enough damage, because we don't see it on satellite photos, we don't know how to read. But the reality is that the vast majority of those Tomahawks would have been armed with sub-munitions and cluster munitions, so bomblets. So very small explosives at an exceedingly large, number of them, and this would destroy airplanes, materiel, but not fundamentally destroy the airbase itself, not fundamentally alter the strategic equation in the area, and not fundamentally leave a marked visible impact. And that's exactly what you want for a slap on the wrist. You know, you don't want to give the Russian government, you know, the Americans destroyed our airbase. You don't want to give the Syrian government, you know, they put, you know, 400-foot deep craters in there. No, that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is cost you time and material. We're destroying airplanes, we're destroying refueling carts, we're destroying everything you left above ground that wasn't nailed down, now has a hole in it. But you can't, we did not destroy the strategic asset that was the airfield. Anyway, we're going to talk about this more in this short video, and as you can see from the garage, I am home. But I felt like the strike was proportional. I felt that it was exactly the way we should project power. Overwhelming power, surgically used, and that it lets everybody know, from China, who we are currently in a meeting with, to Russia, to Syria, to everybody else in the Middle East, that the United States is no longer toothless, that we are no longer going to sit back and allow you to ignore our warnings, our interests, and our stated goals in the area, and that we will act, and we will act swiftly and decisively, and we will act in a way that you have no power to stop. And that means Tomahawks, because there is nobody else in the world that can throw 50 Tomahawks around at a second's notice. Russia can't afford to do it. China doesn't have the technology. Like we're the only people that can do what we just did in the time frame we just did it. And it's about time to remind everybody. As Christopher Walken's famous quote said, to paraphrase, sometimes you got to make sure you remind everybody who they're dealing with. Take it easy.